Applied Linguistics. Fellow scholars, let us welcome virtually our first international lecturer who will talk about language revitalization strategies, importance of investigating reasons for language shift. Professor Dr. Maya Khemlani David.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. David.
My apologies. I was trying to unmute myself. I thought the controls were at your end. Thank you very much, everybody. Good morning. I'm honored and happy to share with you a research area that I have been taking a great interest in ever since I graduated with my PhD dissertation on language maintenance. But today I want to talk to you about revitalization strategies. Thank you for controlling my PowerPoint, and perhaps we can move on to the next slide. Uh, Philip, thank you so much for introducing me. Now, just to give you a background, we have a database which you can find on the internet, which says there are 28 endangered Philippine languages compared with 13 in 2016. So, over a period of 8 years, the number of endangered languages in the Philippines have moved from 13 to 28. So a lot of languages are dying or are endangered. So when we talk about revitalization, we need to know how threatened are these endangered languages? How endangered are they? According to the ethnologue, although they talk about 28 endangered languages, they emphasize that there are 11 languages threatened with extinction. So these 11 languages we should focus on because some are already extinct. So if they are already extinct and there's no last speaker of that language, then there is little that can be done unless there are documented materials of that language. But if it was a spoken language and it has not been written anywhere and nobody is using it now, then there is a problem. So let's look at the 11 languages that are cited in the ethnologue to see which of these still although they are threatened, but there are still some speakers using that language. So there is possibility of revitalizing if there are some speakers still alive using that language, if there are documented materials of that language, if you can get the community interested and encouraged to use that language. So there are many, many ifs when you talk about endangered languages or you talk about languages which are threatened. I did some research for this talk, and in Mindanao itself, there are more than 130 languages spoken, which was mentioned by the previous speaker. And some of these languages that are more widely spoken, you can see on the slide. But we must remember, in most countries, even in Malaysia, the languages spoken by the what we call the Orang Asli or the Orang Asal, which is the original people of the country, they are being lost because the community is moving towards using the national language Malay rather than their own ethnic languages. So we did a study of one of these Orang Asli groups and we went to their village, which happened to be not very far away from where our university is. And we went as a large group of 16 researchers, and each of us were told were given specific tasks. So some of them were looking at numbers. How do you say numbers in those languages? Others were asked, how do you address people? What are the pronouns used? And so on. And we talked to them. And when we asked them even something as simple as the numeral system, how do you say one in your language? How do you say two? And so on. Many of them had actually already forgotten the original languages because they had become so used to speaking the national language. So we need to know if there is a community that is still having some knowledge of the original language. And then we need to document it in that case if there is no documentation of that language. On the other hand, if you have a community that has a lot of materials of their ethnic language, all the materials are in archives or in libraries, but the people themselves are not using the language, then you do not need to document that language. You need to encourage the people to use the language. So what I'm saying is that with revitalization, it depends on the level of the endangerment of the language. If the language is not has documented materials, then you as language activists, you as scholars, don't need to document the language. You don't need to go and ask them like we had to do with our Mamari people. We had to ask them, we had to write it down, we had to create a dictionary, and we had to create written materials in that language by talking to the people, asking them questions. We went to that village many, many times as a group of 16 researchers. So, but the end product was a dictionary. The end product were two books, one in the national language, one in English, where we talk about the different aspects of that language known as the Mamari language. So something came out of it in terms of book materials, in terms of documented materials, but we have now to go on to encourage the people to use the language. There's no point having materials that are documented lying in a library or in archives or in the community center where we kept our materials in the community center of this community. But nobody is still really using the language much because they live near a Malay community and there is a lot of assimilation with the Malay language. So it is the level of use of the other language and the reasons for the use of the other more dominant languages that we have to worry about, and then use the appropriate revitalization strategy. So let's move on to the next slide. Next slide, please. So these are the languages that are threatened, and in Philippines, and you need to see who is threatening the original languages, and you can see that generally it is Tagalog and English. Yesterday I was at a PhD Viva examination written by a Filipino speaker, and she comes from your area, and she was saying that the dominant language now and the home language is Ilocano, Tagalog, and English. But the home language is Ilocano, and Tagalog is taking over quite a bit in the public domain. So you need to know if the language is still being used in the home domain, that's good. That means it's still alive. But if it's used in the home domain, it depends on who is using it with whom. For example, if the parents are speaking in Tagalog, but the grandparents are speaking in Ilocano, and when the children reply, the grandchildren reply, they reply to the grandparents in Tagalog or English. There's a danger there, because although the language Ilocano and Tagalog is being used in the home, but the children are not really responding in Ilocano. They may respond in Tagalog or English. So this is what happened in Singapore also. In Singapore, at one time, the Prime Minister at that time, Lee Kuan Yew, he told the majority community in Singapore, that is the Chinese community, that they should not speak their dialects, that they should speak only Mandarin. Now, what happened then as a result over time is grandparents in the home domain could not speak with the grandchildren because the grandparents knew the dialects and the grandchildren were learning Mandarin in schools. So there was a non-communication, and the parents tried, but the parents also had moved a lot to English. English has become a fairly dominant language in Singapore. And you see that the Chinese community, the Indian community in Singapore are all moving away from the Indian community moving to English to a great extent, and the Chinese community have moved away from the dialects to Mandarin and English. So we need to know what are the languages that are taking the place of the original language. And here in this slide, I've given you some examples. Next slide, please. So we move on to understanding the factors that influence language shift. Why have the different communities that I've spoken to you about shifted from their original ethnic language, their heritage language, to another language? Generally, the other language is the more dominant language. In Malaysia, for example, many of the Indian communities, and when I say Indian, you know that there are speakers of the North Indian languages and of the South Indian languages. So when we say Indian, we're not talking about one language, but of many, many languages. Generally, by large, many of them have moved to the English language, which gives them economic power, And if they are moving up the social ladder, then it also gives them the ability to move in certain high paying jobs if they have proficiency in the English language. But there are political reasons also which create language shift. As I told you, in Malaysia, a lot of the children, the orang asli, the first people of the nation, that the children go to government schools where Malay is the medium of instruction. So language policy, the educational policy can also create language shift. And this, I did a study of one of these communities, the Orang Asli communities, and what has happened is the children now are more used to using the national language Malay because it has become the medium of instruction in schools and the language of interaction with the other ethnic groups. Now, demographic here means if the community is very, very small, like in Malaysia, my ethnic community, the Sindhi community, we are only 1,000 in a country where we have a huge population. So 1,000 is nothing. We are a minority of a minority. So when you are a minority community also, what happens is you tend to assimilate to the majority community. And a lot of the Sindhi community, depending on what generation they are, the second generation who came to Malaysia, they are more comfortable in using English because at that time we had the British colonial government and the medium of instruction was English. And the younger generation, if they go to private schools, then the English is the medium of instruction. If they go to government schools, then Malay is the medium of instruction. And depending on their socioeconomic standing, they either go to public or private schools. And because the community is moving upwards economically, many of them go to private schools. And so the home language in many of the Sindhi homes has become English, where the first generation who came to Malaysia don't speak English much, but many of them are no more with us. But the second and third generation are more familiar and more comfortable and use English much more than they use Sindhi. And many of them don't even know the Sindhi language. So the next point, and I want to emphasize this point, is attitudinal. In many of the studies, this point is not mentioned. Attitudinal means here, what is the attitude of the community towards their own ethnic language? Do they see it as old-fashioned? Do they see it as not giving them power in the job front? Do they see it as not helping them socially to mix with others? Do they see their ethnic language not giving them any economic advantages? So, attitude, we need to see the attitude of the community towards their ethnic language. Because if we know the attitude, then we may use different ways of revitalizing the language, the use of the ethnic language. But if it's economic, social, political reasons, there may be other ways. So for example, if it's the language policy, then perhaps we need to move into the domain of education and try to influence political leaders to introduce the use, the teaching of mother tongues. So in short, language shift, which we must know why has the community moved away from their language before we can determine what strategy we can use to revitalize the language. So language shift is therefore the result of a combination of many factors, including language ideologies. What is the attitude of the community towards their own language and other languages? Power differentials. English gave them greater power to move into higher paying jobs and so on. Now, historical trauma is something many studies don't mention, but it is a fact. When I say historical trauma, let me give you the background to my own ethnic community that I just mentioned. Now, this community has no homeland of its own. This community is living in all countries of the world, including Manila, including the Philippines, including Davao. I have Sindhi relatives in Davao and in the Philippines. So why have they moved all over the world? Why don't they have a country of their own? We need to see what happened to this community from a historical point of view also. So just to give you a very quick idea, this community had to flee, run away from their homeland when India, the British India, was subdivided into two, into Pakistan and into India in 1947. And as a result of that, many Sindhi Hindus, because we have Sindhi Muslims too, but the Sindhi Muslims stayed back in Sindh, which is today part of Pakistan. But the Sindhi Hindus had to flee and they moved to first to India and then from India to all regions of the world. And there is a joke among the community that wherever you go, whether it's America, UK, the smaller islands in the Caribbean, Australia, you will find Sindhis because they have no homeland of their own. And if they have no homeland of their own, when we interviewed younger Sindhis, they didn't even know that they were Sindhis because when their parents fled from Sindh, Pakistan to India, the parents came into India as refugees. And when they came in as refugees, the larger Indian community made fun of them. So what they did was they hid their Sindhi identity by not using the Sindhi language. And many of the younger members of the community cannot speak Sindhi. They never heard it in their home front because their parents started using Hindi to assimilate with the larger Indian community in India then. So we need to know historical trauma. Now, other factors that cause language shift and movement away from the mother tongue or the heritage language. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So urbanization. I've just done a study in Pakistan among the Sindhi Muslims in Pakistan, and many of them are moving away from the rural areas to larger cities like Karachi and this or Islamabad, larger cities. And in these larger cities, the main languages spoken are Urdu and English. So they shift away from the Sindhi language. Even in Sindh, even in Pakistan, the Sindhi Muslims who moved to urban areas have shifted to Urdu and English. Ethnicity, when you want to hide your ethnic, what your ethnicity is, just like the Sindhis did when they first went to India, then of course they don't want to use their ethnic language. Gender issues. Gender issues, it depends whether it's the man or the woman in the house who is moving away from the heritage language. And so a study has to be done where which gender is moving away, even in the same community. Religion. Now, religion is something important. I have been looking at the Sindhi community in the Philippines, the Sindhi community in Indonesia, and in Malaysia, and in Singapore. And a new trend, a fairly recent trend, is a shift not only away from the language, the ethnic language Sindhi, but there's also a shift to another religion, mainly Christianity. And many Sindhis in the Philippines, in Manila, have moved to Christianity, not necessarily the Catholic religion, but other Christian religions. And in Indonesia too, in Jakarta, there is a fairly big community of Sindhis who have become Christians. In fact, there is not only there is an organization that goes around to different countries to encourage the Sindhis, mainly the Sindhi Hindus, to shift away from their Hindu religion to Christianity. And this is an NGO. Many of the people come from the UK and also from America. And they go to different countries every year, have a different conference. The secretary comes from Okinawa in Japan. So the idea is a shift away from religion. Now, when you shift away from your religion, then there is also a chance that you will move away from the use of the Hindu language associated with the religion, use of Sanskrit, and so on, to English. I talked to a young second generation Sindhi in Malaysia, and I asked her what language her mother used to pray, and she said her mother used the Devanagari script in India to pray. But she in Malaysia, she writes her prayers in English. So there's already a shift to another language, even in religion. Next, please. So looking at the reasons, so you need to, if you're looking at communities in the Philippines and you're looking at reasons for shift, basically, a lot of the literature that I have read is the education policy. The education policy and the shift to, in the past, historically, to Spanish during the Spanish regime, but then during the American regime to English, and then to Tagalog, and then to mother tongue. And recently, I understand that there is legislation saying that the mother tongue need not necessarily be always used in the classroom at different levels. That you will have to read up about because this is a recent development, but also the shift in many places from rural areas to urban areas. So if you move from your village where mother tongue is used and you go to the urban area to work, and you go and not only to work, but once you work there, you might stay there for a long time and your children are born there, you get married there, chances are you might shift to the majority language in the urban area. And then in the urban area, or even in your own area, you might find that the language of power that gives you socio-economic capital, that is another language, not your mother tongue, not your heritage language. And so for power, for economic advancement, for job opportunities, you will move to the other language. So as I said, before you think of revitalization, you have to find out why has the community moved away from their mother tongue, from their heritage language. Next slide, please. This is an example that I got from a book by a linguist in the Philippines, and he gives an example of how the mother tongue has been replaced with Ilocano in a specific area. So you have to look at which area you are looking at, which community you are looking at, which heritage language you are looking at, and what is the language they have shifted to and why. Yes, next slide, please. Government policies are a main reason why people move away from their ethnic language. I remember years ago when I was doing a study of the Sindhi community in Malaysia, What happened was when I talked to a grandfather, the first generation, he is now no more, uh, and I asked him what is the language he uses with the grandchildren in the home domain. He said, and I remember these words so clearly, even though it was many years ago, he said, they go to a private school. English is the medium of instruction in the private school. What is the use of me speaking Sindhi to them? Nobody else in the larger community in Malaysia uses Sindhi. Very few community members are around. So I might as well make them proficient in English because the jobs that they will go into, they will have to use English. So this is the rationale given by people in the home domain itself. And if in the home domain the language moves away from heritage language, that's a danger of the language being lost. So, so in a country like Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, we have multilingual, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious. Uh, uh, these are multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multicultural countries, and so there are complex problems when it comes to language policy. So for example, even in the Philippines, a majority Christian country, you also have a large number of Muslims. And so in those areas, what language should be used? What is the policy of the parliament or the government in that region with regards to the use of Arabic? And is Arabic used in the madrasas, in the religious schools? Are there qualified Arabic teachers to teach them? And will it result in them moving away from the use of the mother tongue to Arabic, even in the home domain? So these are questions we have to ask, we have to study, we have to look at these Arabic teachers and the students learning Arabic to see whether even in the home domain, are they moving away from ethnic language to the Arabic language. Uh, the study that I looked at by a Filipino linguist, he said that they struggle, the Bangsamoro students struggle with the Arabic and English languages. But, you know, in a country with different religions, different languages, Malaysia, Singapore, many countries, we have multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious. So we have to see what is the situation in that culture, in that religious group, in that community, and how the government policy is affecting language use. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this is the MTB MLE policy, and it has been said it's too late to stem language shift towards English among middle to upper class school children. So you have to see the socio-economic class of the community you are researching. Okay, so now I move on to revitalization, I think, in the next slide. So these are possible revitalization strategies. So far, I've been talking to you about why communities move away from their language. And I want to now talk to you about revitalization strategies. We have what we call top-down and bottom-up. Top-down means what does the government do to help people go back to their mother tongues, you know? And bottom up is what does the community itself do? What do language activists do to save languages, to save their heritage languages? So, one example of a top-down policy is through government legislation, laws with regards to medium of instruction, laws with regards to national language use. So if more languages are given official status, then that would be good. I'll give you an example from Singapore. In Singapore, although English has become the dominant language of many communities, recently
what happened was Singapore is actually an open country. They encourage people from India, from different countries to come and work in Singapore. And so a lot of Indians from India, the Indian subcontinent, came to Singapore, and they noticed that the only language that children could learn in school as an extra subject. Singapore has a policy of learning another language as an extra subject, and Indian kids were told they could learn only Tamil. Now, although at that time the majority of the Indian population in Singapore was Tamil, um, the Indian expats who came argued in favor of the other Indian languages like Hindi, Urdu, uh, and so on. And so now the government has actually allowed schools to teach these other Indian languages and saying Indian children can choose from these other Indian languages and not necessarily have to only choose Tamil. So the Singapore government policy was you learn English, but you have to have one subject, which is of your heritage language. So Indian children had the choice of only Tamil. But now, because there has been a bottom-up insistence to the government to introduce other North Indian and South Indian languages like Malayali, and that's a South Indian language, Malayalam, and a North Indian language like Hindi. So the government has now allowed schools to teach these languages as an extra subject in and not only Tamil. Now, apart from top-down policies, if you have the power and you know some members of parliament and you can help to change legislation, there is what we call bottom-up, where communities, language activists can help saving languages. The community itself, the older members of the community realize it's important, and they get some younger members to help to encourage people to use the language. But how many such communities exist? I will give you some examples of what the Sindhi community did. Let's move on. Next slide. So I'm giving you the example of the Sindhi Hindu community in diaspora all over the world. They have shifted, as I told you, because they have no country of their own. They are what is known a global diaspora, and there's mass migration away even from India to other countries. Although there is like 3 or 4 million Sindhi Hindus in India today. Yes, let's move on. So reasons for language shift among Sindhi Hindus. As I said, you need to know reasons before you talk about revitalization. So I'm giving you the example of this community, but you will have to look at the community you are studying to find out why they have shifted away. So number one here is a lack of social capital. When they moved to India, they didn't even want to be known as refugees, and they would have been known as refugees if they spoke the Sindhi language. So they stopped using the Sindhi language and they put priority on other languages in India, like Hindi. And many Sindhis have moved to Spain, and there they speak Spanish. Spanish has become the dominant language for them. They have adapted and assimilated to local languages in India and even in other countries. But in India today, there is a strong bottom-up policy, bottom-up movement by the community to encourage people to be proud of being Sindhis, to be proud of using their language. So be proud of being Sindhi. And if you are proud of being Sindhi, how do we know you're Sindhi? Use Sindhi language. So the revitalization strategy means that activists, language activists from bottom up have to make them feel proud by showing them how successful the Sindhis have been, both in businesses and in charities. The Sindhi community in England, in India, is known for giving to others, to give to charities like education, hospitals, and so on. And they have been very successful from refugee status. They have now become very successful economically. Now, influence of education with English becoming the dominant language in private schools. So intergenerational transmission of the language has also been disrupted, with parents not passing on Sindhi in the home domain to their children. And also many mixed marriages. So Sindhi is being lost. So now, how do I reintroduce Sindhi to a community that is using English? So make them feel proud that they are Sindhis, make them feel proud that if you are Sindhis, you have done well business wise. Now do well by using your own language so that people know who you are. And so the bottom up, what they have done is they have used social media to encourage the community to use the Sindhi language. And there are many social media setups which actually encourage the community to use Sindhi. And what has also happened is they're not worried about documentation of the language, because there are lots of documents in the Sindhi language kept in Sindhi libraries in India and even in Pakistan, because there are Sindhi Muslims in Pakistan, large majority. So there are libraries, there are materials. So we don't, as language activists, we don't have to encourage them to document the Sindhi language. In Pakistan, it is documented in the Arabic script. In India now, they're trying to document it in the Devanagari script, because Sindhi has many scripts. So now they're telling the community, you have succeeded, you have economic success, you are now focused on cultural preservation. Focus on the preservation of your language. Don't only focus on material success. Next slide will show you the many Sindhi websites. Now, if you go to many of these Sindhi websites, the activists have created websites to revitalize the Sindhi language. The idea is to instill pride that you are Sindhi, to promote community solidarity through many cultural events. So you have songs, you have social media, you have online platforms. At one time during the COVID regime in the world, every night I was watching at midnight, Malaysian time, midnight, I was watching Sindhi programs in Sindhi, and awareness of the richness of the Sindhi language, the richness of the community in terms of their heritage, in terms of music, dancing, and so on, and cultural shows. And I was revitalizing my own knowledge of the Sindhi language, because the community in Malaysia doesn't use the language much. So I had to revitalize my own use through these websites. So if we can encourage one person to use the language, we should encourage a community to use the language through. And we are lucky nowadays, we have so many online databases and community bottom-up strategies. Next, please. Now, what they have done with the Sindhi language, we say they have gone one step down. They say you don't need to write the language. So long as you use the language, receptive knowledge of the language, understand the language, you hear, you understand, you speak. Don't worry about writing. Okay? So in a way, it's not encouraging them to write, but encouraging them to speak, at least speak. in the home domain. So there have been competitions, language camps, and even today, every day on Facebook, I see messages like, do you want to learn the Sindhi language? There is a one-to-one free tuition for you to learn the language. And then there are competitions for children. Take part in a poetry competition in Sindhi, and we will give you prizes like Kindles. And so that every year there are competitions like this, and parents have to encourage their young children to say something in Sindhi, a poem in Sindhi, a story in Sindhi, and video record it so the parents are involved too. And then through technology, social media, the language activists aim to revitalize the Sindhi language through competitions, through games, through prizes, and reconnect the community to its cultural heritage. So it depends. Why is your community not using the language? What can you do to help them use the language? Do you need to use top down or do you need to use bottom up? If it's attitudinal, then you'll have to use bottom up to encourage them to use the language. So in this case, it's bottom up. Language activists are doing this. We're coming towards the end of the slides. Thank you for being patient. Next slide, please. Now, here I talk about the Sindhis in the Philippines. And what has happened, I'm not going to go through each of these points, but basically you have like 4,000 members of the Sindhi community, and many of them in Manila, many of them, they although they move within their communities and their friendships within the communities, because the dominant language in the environment is English, they have moved on to English. And so they have assimilated. And as I said, some of them have also assimilated to the religion, in this case, the Christian religion, mainly in Manila, the Catholic religion. So there is a lot of shift, not only language, but also religion. And so when language moves, religion moves, how do you retain cultural issues? So they're very aware they are Sindhi. They mix together quite a lot. They have a lot of functions as Sindhis, but the language used in these functions by the younger generation is English. I also looked at the Sindhis in Indonesia, in Jakarta, and there a similar situation where there's a lot of assimilation to the Indonesian language, but and some of them have also moved to the Christian religion. So there's a lot of assimilation because these are minority communities, just like in Malaysia, Sindhis are minority. In Philippines, they are minority. In Jakarta, they are minority. And when you're a minority, you tend to assimilate. So if you want to revitalize the language of these minority communities, you have to do a bottom-up policy. The government is not interested in having Sindhi as a medium of instruction for sure. There are so many other languages in the Philippines and in Indonesia. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the Philippines faces a significant language endangerment crisis with some regional languages at risk. The Sindhi Hindu community, because most of my studies are on the Hindu community, although I've also done the Punjabi Sikh community, the Malayali community, the Telugu community in Malaysia. But I've done the Sindhi community in Malaysia, Singapore, UK, in London. The Sindhi Hindu community in diaspora has experienced substantial language shift due to geographical dispersion, lack of social capital, education, and cultural assimilation. Being a minority, they tend to assimilate with the larger communities. So to revitalize endangered languages, a combination of top-down and bottom-up strategies is necessary, including government legislation, depending, if you have the influence with government. If you're a minority community, then forget it. Documentation, if there's documentation, then and forget about doing documentation. Education policies, again, if you are belong to a minority community, minority language, then you can't change education policies. You can focus on bottom up, community led initiatives, cultural events like the Sindhis are doing, and language programs through social media like the Sindhi community is doing. Preserving cultural heritage and language requires promoting community solidarity. Make them aware you're a community. Make them be proud that they're a community. And if you're proud that you're a community, use your ethnic language. Encourage parents to use their language in the home domain, because once the language is lost in the home domain, it is lost. Use social media today for language education. So, in short, collaborative efforts from governments, communities, individuals, language activists are essential to promote language and the use of the heritage languages. So, finally, in short, we need to know why communities shift away from their mother tongues. We need to find appropriate solutions, sometimes top down, sometimes bottom up, to revitalize endangered languages. Thank you so much for your patience and for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. David. As we transition into the open forum, let's welcome a dedicated second-year Master of Arts in Applied Linguistics student, bringing her own insights and expertise to guide this discussion. Ms. Glay Zaturalba. Ms. Glay?
Yes, hello, maayong adlaw kaninyong tanan. Good day to all of you, and of course, thank you very much, Dr. Maya Khemlani David, for such an eye-opening presentation. It was such an honor to have you here with us today. And I think that we can all agree that Dr. David's topic of language revitalization strategies and understanding why languages shift hits close to home for anyone passionate about preserving culture and heritage. Now it's our time to hear from you, our incredible audience. Let us now jump into the first part of our question and answer session. Now, if you have a question, go ahead and type it into the chat box, and I will read it out for Dr. David to respond. Or if you would like to ask your question directly, just hit that raise hand button and I'll invite you to unmute. All right, let's make this a lively conversation. The floor is open for your insights and curiosities. All right, someone just raise his, first we have someone just raised her hand. One moment, okay? All right, we have Mom Cindy Kazan, a second-year Master of Arts in Applied Linguistics student. Yes, Ma'am Cindy, you can now unmute your mic.
Hello, Dr. Maya. You've presented reasons for language shift and strategies for revitalization, and it is very significant on our part as linguistic students. But how can we convince people to preserve or revitalize indigenous languages, especially the elders who are the only fluent speakers in some communities, but are hesitant to pass on the language, given all the factors you've mentioned on language change or language shift, rather?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Uh,
Thank you for that question. How can you change the attitude, the mindset of the older community members? Um, some of them are aware, they know that it's important to know your own language, but how do you change their mindset? You have to show them. I don't know if you have the materials to show them the beauty of using their own languages. despite the fact, you know other languages. That's very good to know other languages. So don't discourage knowledge of other languages, but explain to them that your heritage is your mother tongue. So it's important to know your own language. And if you have the documented materials, you can show them through social media or through video recordings. You can show dances in their language, cultural dances, songs, music in their own language and their own musical instruments. So revive their interest in their cultural heritage, and in doing so, you might revitalize the language of their cultural heritage, their music, their dances, uh, and maybe even their proverbs, because proverbs carry so much value to a community. And with you lose your proverbs, you lose your metaphors, you lose all this. So show them the plus points of knowing the heritage language, but don't discourage them from using other languages, because we know, as linguists, we know that the more languages you have, uh, you are actually enriched. Your brain works better when you have more languages. Different languages do different things to your mindset, to your brain, and help you see the world in a different light. So don't discourage knowledge of and use of other languages, but emphasize the richness of knowing one's own language. Now, as younger members of the community, it may be hard to persuade older members, but if you can persuade your own grandfather and he can be the leader, he can be a social activist on your behalf for the community. Older people listening to older people, there's more value, more prestige, rather than the older listening to the young. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Ma'am Cindy, and thank you so much, Dr. David, for that very inspiring and encouraging response. All right, we have another question. We have Sir, uh, I mean, an English language student. We have Sir Dadapan, who just raised his hand. Yes, sir, you can now. Yes, Sir Dadapan from English language.
Fullest sense, we revitalize to reinvent our language for new generation for a purpose, for expansion purposes, such as creating new terminology to adapt in a more globalized society. Thank you.
Sorry, what was the question?
My question was, what do we revitalize? Like, do we revitalize to recover traditional language, or do we revitalize to reinvent our language for new generation?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very interesting question. Languages are alive. Languages are moving. Languages are changing. You can see that even the English language dictionaries from the UK, they are introducing a lot of words from local languages, which the notion of that word is not even there in their culture, but now they are using that word in English. So languages grow. Languages are constantly growing. Languages are not stagnant. So when you say, can you use, as a young generation, you are introducing new words to your heritage language, it shows growth. But it's a growth of your heritage language, which is good. You still have your heritage language, and you are actually into some extent, as a young generation, you're modernizing the use. Your older generation may not understand your introduction of new words to your heritage language, but it's still a growth of your heritage language. I find that the Sindhi community in Malaysia, if and when they use Sindhi, they are actually mixing it with a lot of English words. So there's a lot of code mixing and code switching. But you are not talking about that. You are talking about technical terms, for example, coming into your heritage language. And of course, social media and technical terms is something new. For the older people who don't use social media so much. So I think it's a good point you have made that you should be able to introduce new words, but so long as the new words are then documented so that other young people of your heritage, of your culture, of your community also understand the new words being introduced.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. David, for that very impactful response. And also, thank you, Sir Dadapan. Um, I know that there are still a lot of questions running in your mind right now, but as much as we would love to keep diving into your fantastic questions, we still have so much more to explore and share with you. But if you are curious to learn more or have further thoughts, please feel free to connect with Professor Dr. Maya Kimlani David after the session or throughout the conference. So again, thank you everyone for all the fantastic questions and once again a huge round of thanks to Professor Dr. Maya Kimlani David for sharing such invaluable insights today. We are grateful, Dr. David, for your expertise and guidance on the challenges and strategies for language revitalization. All right, that wraps up our Q&A session. Let's keep this energy going for the rest of the conference. Back to you, Miss Loella.
Thank you, Ms. Glyza, for guiding such an engaging discussion and to the participants who shared their questions and insights. Now, to honor our speaker's valuable contribution, we will present a certificate of recognition. Let me read to you the citation. Certificate of recognition is hereby given to Dr. Maya Kimlani David for sharing her time and expertise as resource speaker on the topic Language Revitalization Strategies, Importance of Investigating Reasons for Language Shift during the second Ilmu International Lecture Series on Applied Linguistics held on November 8, 2024 via Zoom. Thank you once again, Dr. David. Before we proceed, let's capture this moment with an obligatory group photo with our esteemed speaker. So if everyone could please turn on their cameras, we'll take a quick snapshot to remember this special moment. All right, ready? Let's all smile for the camera. Thank you so much, everyone. Now,